Well, good day everybody. Appreciate you stopping in. Hey, as you can see, we are in my shop today. It is a rainy Sunday as I am recording this. So I'm not going to be out in the wood yard working today. Generally, I try to not do work on Sundays. I usually try to kind of hang out with the family and do that sort of stuff. But I have been gone the past couple of days, so I am trying to play catch up. And since I have been gone, and I'm trying to get a hydrostat pulled off of a Skag mower. And I have to reseal this hydrostat. But I've ran into a little bit of an issue, and so I figured solving that issue, I figured I would bring you guys along with me and show you my solution, and we'll see if my solution works today or not. So hope you'll stick with me, and we'll run out there and I'll show you what's going on. So here's the hydrostat we're removing. And as you can see, I've started taking this pulley here apart. You can see the wedge lock that my finger's on. It is separated from the pulley, but the wedge lock is still secured onto the shaft. And that's the trouble I'm running into. You see these two bolts here? These are the jacking bolts that you would press up against the face of the pulley here on this flat surface of the pulley. And then you would run these in, and they're supposed to pull this wedge lock off. And a couple years ago I did this side, and the jacking bolts worked perfect. Once I got it out so far, I was able just to grab the wedge lock and slide it off the shaft. Not that fortunate this time around. So I don't have any longer 1/4 inch bolts that have more thread on it, so that's been out of the question. I already tried putting a piece of bar stock in there and doing that, but it twists sideways because I can't keep the bar stock in there in a good spot. As you're running the jacking bolts in, it works the bar stock out of there. And then of course I went to a trusty 2-jaw puller. The problem is this piece of material here and this bar are welded on, and it prevents you from getting a straight line pull. And so I used it to get the wedge lock part way out, but it started getting into the threads here on the puller because it was at a touch of an angle. And so I'm going to just build a small simple puller that I can use to finish pulling this wedge lock off. And we'll get some measurements here. So first things first, I'm going to get a measurement from the center line of these two jacking bolts. It doesn't have to be perfect, and I'll show you why when we're making it. So it looks like we're about 2 inches on center, which puts my... Okay, so I got... That gives me some layout for my new puller, and we'll go in and I'll show you what I got to work with. Alright, so for a piece of material, what I'm using is just a piece of drop. I cut the end of it down. So this is a piece of like 5/16 hot rolled steel. And it is 3 1/4 inches long. So it's just a touch wider than what that wedge lock is. And if I had a piece of thicker drop, what I would do is I would just drill my center hole that my new jacking bolt's going to go in and press on the shaft of the hydrostat. I would just drill that and tap that. Since this is as thin as it is, if I had, and I don't have any fine thread bolts in the bolt bin, otherwise, if I had a little bit thicker piece of material or a piece of, or some fine thread bolts here, I would probably just drill my new hole for the jack bolt and tap this piece of material. But what I'm going to do today is I'm actually going to drill the holes to mount to the original and use the original jack bolt holes to where this will mount to the wedge lock, and then we'll drill a hole and I'm going to weld a nut to the back of it for the new jacking bolt. and we will do that here real quick. I'm going to use my drill press. There's I'm not going to change the tooling over on the lathe or on the mill to do this, so we'll just do this on the drill press because it doesn't have to be super precise. To give me a little wiggle room on my jacking bolts, is the jacking bolts on that wedge lock are 1/4 bolts, so I will put some 5/16 holes in here for the jacking bolts to go in, and that'll give me enough wiggle room side to side and up and down, and then we'll drill our jacking bolt hole, the new jacking bolt, to go on the hydrostat shaft. So we'll lay this out real quick and put some center punch marks in it, and then we'll head over to the drill press. Okay, so I changed my mind on these holes. We're not going to drill them 5/16. Off camera, I was doing a little measuring, and I'm going to use a 3/8 bolt for my new jacking bolt here in the center. And when I measured this piece of material versus a 3/8 nut, the nut is almost the exact same thickness as this piece of material. So I'm just going to drill this and tap it. And the drill hole for the tap for a 3/8 16 tap is a 21/64. So that's basically one step over a 5/16. So we're gonna pre-drill all these holes, and then I'll run a 21/64 drill bit through there, and that'll give me on my mounting holes, that'll give me just a little bit of wiggle room if I need it. And then once we get all the holes drilled, then we'll just go ahead and tap this one. And this is a good idea. I'm going to use a set of my parallels on this. This is just kind of a crappy drill press vise that I use. As you can see, it's got holes drilled in it. The only thing I use it for is to drill holes in material. But between the bottom of the jaws, there's a gap. And when I clamp this in here, it kind of rocks it into here, so it's not sitting flat. So I'm going to take a set of my parallels, and we'll open this up. And my parallel fits down in that groove nice. So I'm going to set those in there, and then I'm going to clamp it between. I'm not clamping real tight, just enough to hold it, but that keeps my material flat in the drill press. So, and then once I get I'm going to touch off with my pilot hole bit. We'll touch off on all my center punch marks, and then we'll put oil on it. Now the reason I touched off without putting oil on there first is if you put oil on there, it can make your center punch holes harder to see. So I always like to touch off. If I was using a centering bit, I wouldn't worry too much about it. But since I'm on the drill press, it's not I'm not building pocket watches here, so I'm not trying to be super precise. This is just supposed to be a simple basic tool. So, and this will work just fine. But now I'll go ahead and I'll put oil on my piece of material, and then we'll start drilling. And just if anybody's wondering, the parallels I was using, these aren't my good parallels. This is a pair of cheap Chinese ones I keep around just for doing oddball stuff when I need something to work. If you don't have something like this, you could drop a couple pieces of scrap metal in there just so this stays flat and out of these grooves in the vise. So before we go and tap these, I'm going to take a countersink bit and we'll just deburr these holes real quick. I don't know if you can see this or not. Try and get it to focus here. There's in the back of this tap, there's this little hole to help me get the tap started. I have this homemade center punch that works in my vise or in my drill chuck, and I use that to kind of keep it lined up straight. And then I was able to use that to keep pressure on it while I got it started. And it just makes it easier to start the tap in the material. Once I started getting some threads to cut, I let off of that and then I just spun the tap wrench down in there. So, and you can see I actually had the vise clamp down this time to keep it from spinning. And I don't know if you can see that or not. We got a threaded hole. So we'll clean this up and we'll take it outside and we'll bolt it on and we'll see if we can't get that wedge lock off that pulley. I did put some anti-seize on this new jack bolt to lubricate it as we're running it in. I'd say our puller worked. Well, folks, there we got the wedge lock out of that pulley. I got the hydrostat off and in the shop. I need to get it cleaned up and I'm gonna start resealing it. But I'll be honest, it's been a while since I've resealed one of those. So I'll probably put some clips of that in here at the end, but I'm not going to have you refer to me on resealing hydrostat, so as it's not something I do every day, but I have done several, so no worries there, but I wouldn't consider me an authority to teach you. So but our simple little puller worked. It worked out really good. The wedge lock was out far enough that it didn't have a lot of tension on it. But like I could not pull it with my hands. I'd tried a pry bar already. I'd even tried a couple of ladies' feet, getting them in there, and there's just not enough room. I think the ladies' feet would have popped it off, but there's just not enough room to function those the levers on them. So that was kind of out of the realm of possibility. So using this piece of scrap steel, drilling a couple of holes and threading one of them, that worked out really well. Normally, like I said, on a puller, when I make homemade pullers, I prefer to use a fine thread bolt. But I didn't have any in a bolt bin, so we worked with what we had, and it worked out really good. And so with that, I will cut this off here. Like I said, I'll probably put a couple clips of me working on the hydrostat in here at the end, just so you can see what I'm doing. But other than that, I hope you folks all have a good week, and I'll see you soon.